Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Our guests are Travis Michael Holder and artist landscape specialist Stephen Robert Johns. Actor-critic Travis Holder was born in Chicago and spent his childhood on the stage there and in New York City. Did you really start at 3, Travis?
No, I'm afraid I did. I wasn't pushed in it. I didn't have one of those stage mothers. My mother was an actress. She was doing a tour of Oklahoma, and I went with her, and they thought it'd be cute if I got on and sang about carrots and potatoes or something.
Is that how it started? When you went with your mother?
I went with her to spend the summer and never stopped.
That was great.
Well, actually, I didn't act from 3 to 6, and then.
Then you did your schooling in Chicago?
Yeah. Well, mostly I was in New York. When I was a kid.
Did you take high school? Go to high school in New York?
Yeah, I went to professional school most of the time I was growing up, but Chicago was my home. But New York is really where I feel most connection.
Oh, but that's how you were able to keep acting. Then you were going to professional school. I was wondering if there was a time in there where you had to be in Chicago.
Nope. No. I don't really know Chicago that well. It's funny.
I see. Yeah. And then you kind of bypassed college to come to LA.
I had a chance to do a lot of different sort of things with college, but I actually went to Europe to do Hello, Dolly, and I spent a couple of years in London, and then we went to Moscow for the cultural exchange for the State Department, and then we entertained troops in Vietnam and Formosa.
What were you doing in Hello, Dolly?
What theater? Oh God, don't do that to me.
Singing, dancing?
Oh, what was? I thought what theater was I
doing? No.
I played Barnaby.
Oh, you played Barnaby, tall, skinny little Barnaby.
Yeah. Well,
which was the role?
I used to be tall and skinny then, so.
Which was, what's his name? Phantom of the Opera's role.
No, I think he was Cornelius.
Oh, he was Cornelius.
Yeah.
But they were a duo, weren't they? Barnaby and Cornelius.
Definitely. And then I came to LA from there.
I see. So, did you have training as a singer?
No.
Dancer?
No.
How did you get up and do that?
It just seemed like natural to me. As a matter of fact, the first time I was ever in a class, I kept very quiet because I thought I must be doing everything wrong. People were talking about objectives and beats, and I was saying, God, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I just have to get up and say the words, you know. So it was just sort of something I did. I felt more comfortable probably on a stage when I was a kid than any place else. It's where, people, laughed with me, sort of a thing. So I was very, when I was 8, after being in New York 2 years, my mother wanted me to come back to Chicago and be a real kid.
Oh.
And I can remember sitting at Rumpelmeyer's with her, and she said, we're going home, and I said, all right, well, wait a minute here, you got me into this. And I don't think I can go back to that now, I'm sorry, but this is where I belong. And so she actually used to say she remembered the feeling of knowing what had transpired and that she had created a monster.
That was great, the monster. But then you talk about monsters, then you had a touring gig with Hair.
Yeah.
And you were still singing and dancing, I guess, right?
Yeah, I was actually, when I first was out here, it was under, during my, I call it my Troy Donahue reject days, before I got old and fat, and I was under contract to a studio, I should probably remain nameless, and I went to do Hair, and they said, that'll be the end of your contract if you do that. And
oh, is that right?
I see you around.
And you did go do Hair?
Yeah, theater is, I never knew what, at that point, I'd been a theater artist, so film and television didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I was a heavy kid and played character roles, and all of a sudden I was thin and modeling and good looking for about 20 minutes. And I didn't know what.
And that's what you did in LA? You were modeling and doing, I see.
And I literally, when I was under contract, I literally would get offered, jobs that people like Troy Donahue had turned down, and I just didn't know.
I see.
It just wasn't where I was comfortable. Theater has always been and still remains my love.
But then all of a sudden, after Hair, what happened?
I got involved in the music business. I met a lot of music people through Hair, and I ended up at the Troubadour. I was talent coordinator of the Troubadour during the infamous days of the Troubadour, when it was probably the most important folk rock club in America, if not, the premier in many ways. And I was in the music business for many years.
So you were booking shows. Were you singing? Were you on stage?
No,
but you
I
were
was just
actually booking.
I discovered, I brought a lot of real famous people to the fore, and we produced concerts eventually and managed some people, including Glenn Frey from the Eagles.
Did you? But that couldn't have been very rewarding when you were on stage. When you're on stage, you love to be.
I stayed in class I was 13 years in the music business. I always stayed in class, but I never acted. I had a very dear friend, Betty Ford, not
the Betty Ford?
The Betty, B-E-T-T-E Ford, who was a bullfighter in the 40s and 50s, and she was one of my dear friends, and she kept saying, you must act. That was, this is what you do, and she really was the person I credit for bringing me back to it.
To keep you going. But then you spent some time marketing things and doing public relations.
Yeah. It's it's called survival, I guess.
I guess, right.
I'm the only 6'2" juvenile shaped like a bowling pin. So film and television roles were far and few between, and that brought me a few dollars to do what I want to do.
I really shouldn't look at it that way, because your colleagues were probably waiting on tables. And you were in, waiting, a wait staff somewhere. So at least you were at a level where you could control things. And then you started being a theater critic.
I met a lot of people through PR, and through, it's kind of a double-edged sword to write reviews, which I've been doing for 13 years, and act. But I've met a lot of friends through that. I've lost a couple, but primarily, I try to be really honest and really fair. And
being a critic, yeah. You've lost a few.
I've lost a few, but I've gained many, many, many more. And
but I think if you're honest, that there can't be any criticism of you. It's your honest view of your critique.
I honestly think all critics should have some point each year where they get somehow involved in some sort of form of producing, so that they don't get bitter and judgmental without realizing what it takes to make that happen. I think critics get a tendency to sort of forget when they see something 3 times a week.
And I think that's what happens with the actor. The actor, if he's dissatisfied with the critic, says, oh, he's just frustrated. He wanted to be up here acting, or he wanted to be the producer, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's good to have that exchange and do it.
I remember when I did a play recently, I said in the end of my column that I was doing it, and I said, come see me put my talent where my mouth is.
Oh, that's good. To admit it, at least, to say that. You didn't do much film work, did you?
No.
Being here in Hollywood?
Nobody ever, literally people don't know what to do with me.
And what
it's
about
very hard for me to get
TV? Same thing, right?
Same thing. Yeah, agents don't ever, that's the first step, and nobody ever seems to know quite how to market me, where to push me best. I do lots of theater. It's what I love.
But
and then all the agents come and tell me how amazing I am, and then they say, sign me, and they say, well, you have to understand. And
right. But they don't take you to film. They come and see you and tell you how great you are, but they don't. But, that must be your niche. That must be the place you...
It's what I love most.
I was talking to an actress the other day, and she said, oh, I was in a play with Travis 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So, the process goes on and on and on.
I'm the king of 99-seat theater for free, But I love doing it.
Yeah, and as long as you love it. One of the things that I saw you in recently was this wonderful play that Leon Katz had written called Beds. And he has a real artistic bent in his writing, and I know you're an artist, you paint, and of course loving the theater as much as you do. I think it takes a different kind of artistic mentality anyway to be on the stage. So we have a clip. Explain it, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
I'm Oscar Wilde. That's why the hair is like this. I've grown it out for this, which we're just finishing up the run. And I'm Oscar Wilde on my deathbed. It's 2 years after being released from prison, and it's actually the night he dies, November 30th, 1900.
It's the night he dies?
Yes.
Okay, let's see it. Oh, poor Oscar.
All right, I go again. I embark again out of this bed, out of this fame. It is unshakable now, Posey. It does not leave. It has no intervals. Whatever flight I imagine out of this bed, whatever way, whatever journey, there's no escape from its stabbing. None, no. Very well, I take it with me, and I pretend that it is only metaphor. In that pretense, breathe, I can hardly. I must find in my darkening mind a congenial. Yes, to be sure, I must slip into another's torments. Whose? Oh, the panoply of choices. Yes, I, sharing the broken body of the Knights Templar Jacques Dumoulin, broken in questioning from the court of the French Inquisition, they using your vile father's weapons, your lunatic's father's charge of sodomite. Together, they betrayed Knights Templar.
You've exhausted me. How could you do that every night? I mean, look at what you went through.
It's not easy. Well, I dumped my head in the sink, you know, so it's not all my real sweat.
Thank goodness.
I get to start under the sink, but it's not easy.
The secrets of the trade.
Yeah, I find I take a nap in the afternoons when I'm doing it, which is not usually like me, but it is very exhausting.
But one of the things in this play called Beds are 3 different actors, and they're tormented live. And you are sitting there as Oscar Wilde in torment because Bosie, your love, has he turned his back on you?
Yeah, and which, you know, he's one of the really great monsters of history, I think.
We had a lot of monsters, though.
Yeah, when Oscar Wilde got out of prison, he basically just would have nothing more to do with him. As a matter of fact, later in his life, I believe in the 50s, he wrote a book and sort of denied that the relationship ever really happened. That it was just, you know, metaphoric almost, which is kind of ridiculous.
We talked about the Leon Katz who wrote it, but he also directed you.
Yes.
What did he have to do to you to get that kind of performance?
You know, I was lucky enough to study with Ken McMillan, the late Ken McMillan in the late 70s, early 80s, and the one thing he always used to say is, just trust the words, you know. The art is already there, and in this case, the words are absolutely amazing. Leon is one of the great writers.
So you just know that a good writer gives you good words, and you just start.
Yeah, Leon said to me the other night when we were working that it's a thrill to watch the performance, but he knows that in my life there must have been enough pain for me to understand what he was going through, and I've had 4 cancer surgeries in my life. The last one 15 years ago, but I certainly know what it's like. So
you know where to draw, is that it?
Yeah.
For the pain and the...
Absolutely.
Ooh, let's get away from the pain. You're a painter.
Well, yeah, sort of.
You are a painter.
Yeah.
Are you self-taught?
Yes.
Because you did, for the program, you painted the 3 characters. I thought it was so great. I did the Wilde piece. You did the Wilde piece.
And it's kind of interesting because it's the first time I've done a watercolor in about 15 years, and I did it before this production. I just saw a photo. I knew that Leon wanted me to do this. We'd done a reading of it at LMU, Loyola Marymount, and I had gotten a book that had this photograph of Wilde in 1885 in New York, when he was doing his lecturing there, and something made me want to paint it. So it was actually serendipity that it ended up as a theme for the program and for the mailing and all that. Yeah.
Well, it was great.
Thank you.
And I've loved knowing you for so long.
And the first thing you said is, "Would you paint me?" And,
I did.
You know, which is, after seeing Hockney and all the other people who have done you, I mean, it's a great thrill to even suggest such.
Are you going to?
Yeah, you betcha. I'd be happy to.
We're gonna have Travis Michael Holder's painting of Joan Quinn on the show soon, I hope. And thanks, Travis.
You.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with Stephen Robert Johns. Hi, we're back, and I'm Joan Quinn. Artist, landscape designer Stephen Johns was born and raised in Santa Monica and graduated from Palisades High School. Then he went to Chouinard Art Institute. Stephen has given art classes all over the LA area.
That's
Have you
right.
taught art everywhere?
That's right.
How did that start?
Well, I guess during the early 80s, a woman by the name of Joan DeBruin ran the Junior Art Center in Barnstall Park in Hollywood.
Right.
And she had a couple of classes that needed an artist from the art community to give classes to the handicapped, special education needs.
I see.
And the director of that particular program was Dr. Mary Martz. So she hired me on a trial basis to see how I worked with the young adults and the children to teach art classes, and it worked out. And for 8 years I worked with Barnstall Park and also with LA County Museum of Art, because Mary Martz was also the director of education there, special education.
That's fabulous, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, did you always want to be an artist? And here you're inspiring artists everywhere.
Well, I did always want to be an artist. Probably from the early ages of childhood, I was given crayons and sketchbook and oil paints, which was sort of unusual. I enjoyed painting as a child, and was doing portraits when I was just 5, 6 years old.
You're kidding.
They were okay. They weren't that good.
Really?
But I was drawing the face. Yeah.
You saw my collection of portraits, because that's the thing that I really, and then Travis was talking about it earlier, because I think it just is such a way to get part of an artist. They're painting you, but they're putting themselves in it, and I think it's so important.
Well, and those portraits that are of you are wonderful, and especially a couple of the last ones I really enjoyed.
Well, tell me why you chose Chouinard. Were there a lot of other art schools around?
Oh, sure. There's Art Center. There was Otis. I particularly chose Chouinard because of my influence from my grammar school and my junior high school art teachers. They both schools that I was growing up in, they recommended Chouinard. So when it came to graduate from high school, and they asked you, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into the service, or do you want to go to college? Which college? I wanted to go into Chouinard, and I had no idea what it looked like, where it was. I knew it was in Los Angeles somewhere.
But you just decided?
That's right, and I was a young surfer, growing up in the Pacific Palisades, Santa Monica area, and really was not familiar with the Los Angeles area. And of course, Chouinard was down on near Westlake Park, near MacArthur Park, and so it was quite a culture change for me to see the inner city.
Well, we do. You know, we have other artists, surfers. We have Laddie Dill and Guy Dill and Ned Evans. And
they were both students at Chouinard while I was there.
Were they? So you guys must have run to the beach more.
My first year at Chouinard, I was dropped because of the surf being good up the coast in Santa Barbara. And so I was ditching my classes, and they said goodbye. But I was able to get a reprieve, and they accepted me back, and I was able to graduate from there.
Do you hang out with other artists, or do you think that's an important part of your background?
If you can't interact with other artists, I think you're missing out on something big. I really didn't do much of that for the last 20 years. And I received a couple of fellowships to travel to Costa Rica and paint in an art colony, the Julia and David White Artist Colony.
I was going to ask you about that. How long ago was that?
Well, that was 98. It was my first fellowship. And
not very long ago.
And last year was my second.
Oh, so you go down to an artist colony and work with other artists, just Costa Rican artists, Latin artists, or other artists?
Well, the interaction with artists, I learned a lot about that with the Costa Rican culture, because I met artists down there that were Costa Rican. However, at the art colony, I was isolated, actually with a woman from Washington, D.C. who was a painter, and a writer from New York. So we were all interacting, but really not with the community of Costa Rica. We were isolated on a 17-acre artist colony out about 30 minutes from the capital, San Jose.
So they had other types of artists, not just painters.
That's correct, yeah. Composers, musicians, writers.
Fabulous.
I think the gentleman, Phil Higgs, who was staying there while I was there, was a writer from The Nation magazine.
What a great program.
It really is, and we had a chance to talk at lunch, and we would all express our feelings about being there and interacting with the community.
It's like the Academy in Rome, where they have all different types of artists come and live together.
And here we are, we're sharing meals together, and of course we're sharing our problems and our successes. And we would be taken to the galleries, and that's where I met other artists. And some of these artists were quite prolific in Costa Rica and also in Europe. So it really made me feel like I was missing out on something. You know, art, it was almost like taking me back to art school.
When you were in art school, did you have other art idols? Did you have idols that you thought about and wanted to work?
Oh yeah, yeah. Michelangelo has always been just the most astounding artist to me, and of course Pablo Picasso. These two artists, a great time difference between the two.
Really?
Yet the way they could draw anatomy or the person or capture a feeling or their compositions just was, they were inspiring to me.
We have this kind of jog in time, I think you say. There's like a period where you were still painting, but you were doing landscape work.
Mm-hmm.
What, is that a way to make a living instead of waiting on tables like actors do, or was that something that you just had to do to be a landscape artist?
A little, I think both. You know, I had a tough time, I guess my growth period was kind of reaching a standstill, or I was hitting a wall in the early 80s.
In the painting, you mean?
In the painting, I wasn't readily accepted in Los Angeles with my work. Maybe it wasn't getting out enough, or I just was getting those rejections that were becoming overwhelming from galleries. But my success with painting was good during the 70s, but the 80s weren't good. And so I had a friend, John Wayne Gregg, who was a great landscape designer in LA, and he showed me the ropes. He took me to the nurseries, and I've always had a green thumb.
Is that how, you didn't go to school to be a landscape architect?
Oh, I could grow corn from popcorn kernels. For some reason, I had a nice touch with it. And I never wanted to be a landscape designer. I never wanted to plant things, really. I killed things more than made them grow. But after being with this friend of mine, this gentleman, John, he taught me a lot. And I became sensitive to planting and composition. I realized it was a good therapy to put my hands in the dirt. And I regained a lot of confidence with doing my painting and sculpture, and also doing landscape sculpture. And then I did get a contractor's license to landscape, so through the state, and that helped open a lot of doors for getting work.
Did you work with other landscape architects, or did you just start planning these things by yourself? How do you know what to plan? You have a square of backyard. What do you do?
It's tough. It's good to go to the Getty. There's a good start in Malibu. They have a wonderful landscape design there of different types of drought tolerant. And
all the way. That's what I was going to ask you about.
And
what
rich
the trends in planting are. It used to be drought tolerant. Mm-hmm. Is it still that trend?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think it'll always remain that way. And
tell us what that really means in case someone doesn't understand.
Drought tolerant is planting plants that do not require a lot of water, and are able to survive in this arid environment, such as Southern California is.
So when the sun's beating down on them, you don't always have to have your water run.
I saw a wonderful program last night on Gardens of New York. And I was in New York last week and saw some of the most incredible 40-foot trees on 50-foot buildings, the top of the 50-foot buildings.
So you mean they don't need a lot of soil? Is that it?
Well, they need a minimum amount of soil, and they need care. But it's nice to see that plants are being grown in different environments other than just in a yard. Let's say our gardens here.
Well, we don't have a picture of some of your work, but tell me what you would use and how you would do it.
Well, I enjoy working with Japanese-style gardens.
I see.
So the bones of a garden, or the basic foundation of a garden, I would automatically go to a Japanese maple or ginkgo trees.
I see.
These trees reflect a mood and a feeling and a seasonal change, as well as a wonderful looking leaf and good coloration. So those are just two trees that I probably would begin to use as a foundation for a garden. But I love using azaleas, rhododendrons.
Oh, I was going to ask you,
grass.
Do you want color? Do you use flowers?
Well, I'm really, I probably would prefer to use texture over color, although I'm a colorist with my painting.
Right.
The gardens probably reflect more textural changes and more movement based on the wind that blows through the garden. So that's another probably influence from the Japanese gardens. While I was in Japan having a museum show with my paintings, I was totally distracted by the gardens that were just in everybody's homes. They were very simple but wonderful, wonderfully kept.
When you were in Japan, were you already painting? And were you already doing landscape?
Yes.
So you had them both?
1997.
I see. So does the garden landscape influence your painting, or has your painting influenced the landscape?
They both do now. But
you mean they interact?
They really do interact. And at night I'll go to bed wondering about a wall I'm building for a home that's a landscape, or possibly a tree that I want to plant. And at the same time, I have my painting series that have been evolving over the last 5 or 6 years that have become serious work for me.
So does this remind you of a landscape, or the piece in the back?
Well, actually, the piece in the back is it's titled Water Series, and it's inspired by a book I read, The Perfect Storm by Sebastian Unger. This particular painting is a view that I saw coming into Guatemala City around 6 in the morning, with still dark, but illumination coming from underneath the trees. So it's really a top view drawing looking down on a jungle city.
Oh, so you do see the trees. It's just abstracted.
Yeah, in fact, I think before my trips to Costa Rica the last 2 years, I didn't see trees or plants or leaves in my work.
Ah, so that fellowship really did do make a big difference, even though you were landscaping.
Even though I was landscaping. Yeah, the landscaping and the painting were two distinct professions that I was executing during the day or week or month, but I really couldn't bring them together. They were two separate entities. Now, it seems that, like I said, at night I go to bed thinking about both.
That's great. And when our people go to bed tonight, think about his paintings, Stephen Johns, and think about the landscaping. Thanks. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Joan.
And thank you for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 40th floor, Los Angeles 917. And we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.